Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Lee Saperstein, Vice President of the Nantucket Civic League, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the virtual annual meeting of the Civic League, the 2021 meeting. The order is quite simple. Our co-presidents will give a presentation on past activities and future plans. We'll then have a presentation of the Civic Salute, and it's a good one. We get a legislative update from Senator Sir, and the office of Dylan Fernandez. And then our featured speaker is Vince Murphy, the Coastal Resilience Coordinator for the town of Nantucket. And we'll end up with a little bit of business, minutes, treasurer's report, etc. But I think I know what we did when we organized the program is to put the good stuff first. So starting with good stuff, co-presidents Peter Morrison and Charlie Stott.
Well, thank you so much, Lee. I'm Charlie Stott, the co-president of the Civic League. And the past 18 months have been unique for us all, including the Civic League. We've gained proficiency in using Zoom to meet and conduct business at our regular meetings and president's breakfasts, and here today at our annual meeting. And I might add that it's our 118th annual meeting. Hopefully next year's annual meeting will be back once again at the Sconset Casino, followed by refreshments. First, let's agree that thanks are due to our town of Nantucket public officials and everyone at Nantucket Cottage Hospital for their leadership, and to our residents and visitors for wearing masks, practicing social distancing, and abiding by their rules, which keep us safe. The Nantucket Civic League has 4 primary goals: preserving the island's resources, informing the public on island issues, improving quality of island living, and encouraging participation in town government. This past year, we've been active on all 4 fronts, which I'll briefly highlight. This year, we attracted a record 136 attendees at our February 6th forum on managing water as sea levels rise. Many more viewers watched it, either live or later on demand on Nantucket's Channel 18. Later this spring, we held our 2 signature public forums, Meet the Candidates and Meet the Articles. We discovered, to our surprise, that virtual meetings can be effective. So we stayed with the Zoom virtual format for our summer president's breakfasts. Sadly, bacon and eggs cannot yet be delivered over the internet. Among other accomplishments this year, first, our 2 summer presidents' meetings enabled our 23 association leaders to share their local area concerns and their successes. Second, a team of students from Worcester Polytechnic Institute, mentored by co-president Peter Morrison, presented their recommendations based upon their latest study for our Nantucket Fire Department. This year's study focused on streamlining access to water sources in neighborhoods without fire hydrants. As in past projects, the WPI students helped make Nantucket safer for us all. Third, we refined our Civic League's Civic Engagement Initiative. This is our initiative intended to encourage broader, more diverse participation by candidates for public office. We're videotaping numerous public officials, elected and appointed, who describe in their own words the responsibilities of serving in public office and the practical considerations involved. Later this fall, we'll begin posting these 5-minute videos in an effort to recruit a broader spectrum of aspiring candidates from all of Nantucket's communities in time for next year's elections and committee appointments. As a follow-up to that discussion, we've reached out to Kamal McCarthy, Kamal is our town's Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. He's accepted our invitation to become one of our new friends and advisors, persons whom we want to involve in our Civic League initiatives. Other recently appointed friends and advisors, Jason Gratisdai, the editor of Nantucket Current, who writes for N Magazine, Charity Grace Morrison, who now serves as legislative liaison to our state representative, Dylan Fernandez, and Sconset Civic Association Vice President, Gail Walker. More about Gail Walker. Gail facilitated one of this year's forums, unquestionably one of our most successful topical forums in years, on combating light pollution on Nantucket. In the wake of this successful forum, Gail has been a veritable tornado of activity, bringing to life nantucketlights.org, a website that's raising awareness about light pollution and advocating for environmentally responsible outdoor lighting. There's now a steering committee with representatives of many of our associations, and Gail has managed to attract the media attention that this issue deserves. Mark, would you please display the brochure for a few seconds?
You got it. 1 second here.
Most recently, Gail has designed and overseen production of a color trifold brochure paid for by the Civic League that our 23 associations can now distribute to our entire Civic League membership and all islanders. Mark, would you bring that up or do I have to do it?
1 second.
Okay,
Do you see it now?
no.
Let's see. Says it's sharing. No one else sees the brochure?
No, your final page is up. Click on Dark Skies brochure.
Okay. Let me just try one other thing. Sorry about that. I think I just have to change the setting real quick. Okay.
While Mark's doing that, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I think this will fix it.
Okay,
You
while
see it
Mark's
now?
doing it, there you go.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark.
Sorry about
So
that.
this is a brochure that is available for distribution to all of our Civic League associations and hopefully all of their members. Kudos to you, Gail. And Gail, if we can focus on you for a second, we just want to thank you so very much for all of the time and energy that you put into this very important topic. At our July President's meeting, John Brescher, who's chair of the Town Government Study Committee, updated us on the committee's work. We also heard from 3 of our association presidents representing Sconset, Nantucket, and the town about their progress in developing local area plans as part of the town's master planning process. A vigorous discussion ensued. This year, the executive committee favored strengthening our efforts to work for improving town infrastructure. Upon the committee's unanimous vote, the Civic League took the unusual step of publicly supporting 5 warrant articles.
Charlie, perhaps we can persuade Mark to make you full screen.
For
Want me
a
to-
pump station
Yep.
and construction of the Noberdier Field House. We also supported appropriations for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We purchased advertisements in local media outlets, urging voters to support those warrant articles. The result? These articles were approved by voters at town meeting. Thereafter, they passed a Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion override vote at the June 15 election. As you know, we emphasize communications. Each month, we update our association presidents on our past month's activities and our forthcoming agenda. We use our quarterly newsletter, Nantucket Notes, to inform leaders and members about various current issues. This year, those issues included concerns over harmful PFAS in our water and coastal erosion and flooding. Our quarterly newsletters are reaching our growing audience of Civic League members and followers. And Mark, before we go to this next segment, I think we've seen enough of the
Okay.
Guide to Responsible Outdoor Lighting for Residences. So
Sure.
thank you for bringing that up. I'm now pleased to introduce Co-President Peter Morrison, who will describe what lies ahead in the coming year. Peter?
Thank you, Charlie. And before I begin with the preview of 2022 priorities and plans, I want to say that we do have an award-winning quarterly newsletter, and I hope that all people who are attending who want to keep up with the Civic League's activities will email either Charlie or myself and ask to be added to the distribution list. The quarterly newsletter is really a terrific way to keep up on what is going on with the Civic League. And I want to say that this past year was especially productive because what it did is set the stage for what is ahead over the next 12 months. And I'm going to simply highlight several important new directions that we've embarked upon. Our major effort this coming year is going to be our Civic Engagement Initiative, which was launched in May and is already underway. As Charlie already mentioned, the aim of this initiative is to encourage broader, more diverse participation in town municipal activities by all Nantucket residents. We're partnering with several other community organizations to do so. These include the Inquirer and Mirror and some others. We've engaged our local public TV station, Channel 18, to establish our own Civic League YouTube channel that'll be on their website. And we'll use this to disseminate our short videos, which are intended for busy people. These are 6-minute videos that will offer online resources to everyone from any country of origin community on Nantucket who might be inclined or vaguely interested in learning more about how to volunteer for appointment to a town committee or to run for local elective office. These 6-minute videos, which we are now taping and editing, will feature interviews with persons who've served on town committees and can share their experiences. We want this library of short videos to be a permanent resource, something that can offer a window into the day-to-day operations of volunteer committees and elective offices. We want them to help broaden awareness of the practicalities of how committees operate and the rewards of such service that can be offered to those who want to participate. We also want them to appreciate the mechanics of seeking an appointment or campaigning for election, and also something to do with the time commitments and effort that are involved in civic participation in one or another way. Finally, we plan to inaugurate a 3rd annual signature forum in addition to our traditional Meet the Candidates and Meet the Articles. This new forum will be called Meet the Committees. It's going to offer practical guidance on the appointment process and details of applying by publicizing committee seats that are open and by encouraging participation by a broader base of participants from across Nantucket's various country of origin communities. Let me just briefly summarize other new and continuing efforts ahead. These include, first, broadening the Civic League's influence by collaborating with other like-minded nonprofits. We're working on establishing the Nantucket Community Roundtable as an informal partnership of fellow leaders of influential local nonprofit organizations. The roundtable would identify the challenges our community faces, prioritize these concerns, and activate collective efforts to effect these changes. Another continuing effort, we're continuing to support our several member associations, which are now in the process of developing their own local area plans, which will be inputs to the town's updated master plan when that eventually gets done. This process has been delayed at the town level, and it's been rather frustrating, but our neighborhood associations have persisted and are following through in accordance with the town's instructions. And we, the Civic League, are coordinating their efforts with the intent of assuring that those neighborhoods that want to voice their concerns can do so as they have been invited to do. Lastly, we continue to sponsor annual applied research studies by teams of Worcester Polytech students, which benefit Nantucket as a whole. In years past, our Civic League has been instrumental in proposing and sponsoring, by my recollection, 4 such studies, and we're proposing new ones for the year ahead. So that's it for our review of 2021 by Charlie and my preview of 2022. And I'll now turn the meeting back to our moderator, Lee Saperstein, to ask for any audience questions if we have time. Thank you.
Peter and Charlie, thank you for that presentation. By the way, before we start our question and answer, I think it's appropriate for me to remind people that this entire session is being recorded. I know you'll want to watch it at least 2 or 3 times. It's almost as exciting. No, I was going to be cute and say almost as exciting as The Wizard of Oz or Harry Potter or whatever. But it is important, and for those people unable to attend, it will be available on NCTV 18. At last count, we had 32 participants. We're hoping there may be 1 or 2 more. Now, at the bottom of your screen, there's a icon for raised hand. If you click on that icon, our noble assistant at NCTV 18 will see you and call on you in the order in which the hands are raised. Mark, is that appropriate?
That is appropriate.
Have you got hands?
Not at the moment.
Oh, surely somebody wants to know more about what we're doing. Let me key up the comment on or the effort on participation. Nantucket is a lovely place. There's a huge number of volunteers who assist, whether the town government or the schools or the medical community. We simply want to get more of our newcomers involved. So I hope I'm ringing a bell and that somebody will raise their hand. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask questions for another 5 minutes.
Looks like we have a question from Richard.
Good.
Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you. So this is Rich Schwab. I'm in 6 Wigwam. And I think what you guys are doing is amazing. I've been on a couple meetings. I'm going to try to become on more of them. One of the things potentially I'd like to raise for the coming year, and maybe this is the wrong forum, but I have talked a little bit about this in the past, is the rifle range and shooting park, and then the potential risk to the water from lead bullets. And I just wanted your comments on that, if at all possible. Or maybe that's too hard of a question. I'm sorry.
No, Richard, this is Lee Saperstein.
Hi, Lee.
We have people on both sides of the issue involved in this meeting. I'm going to suggest to Charlie and Peter that it's an important issue that we should take not under advisement, but under consideration for future agendas so that we can learn more about it. It's my understanding that there is a long-term lease with the town. And so the town is obviously deeply involved in this. I'm not sure whether that will make you entirely happy, but we are aware of the issue and we'll put it under consideration. Peter, Charlie?
Yeah, I would only add that, yeah, our executive committee can consider the issue and decide whether they want to take a position or not. And one of the factors that goes into making those kinds of decisions is the Civic League's organizational integrity. If we take a position and 50% of our associations support that position and 50% oppose it, those who are opposed to the position might very well say, well, we don't need to be a part of this organization. I think we need a very broad consensus if we're going to take a position in order to ensure organizational integrity.
So
Charlie, if I could just add a point, I think the simple answer to Rich is that we are going to have our monthly meeting tomorrow of the executive committee. And I will make a point of bringing it up under other business to remind folks this has been around for a long time, and we will want to watch it in the months ahead.
Yeah, this is Rich again, and I'll stop in a second. I just think it's a big deal, not just for the Civic Association, it's really a big deal for all of Nantucket. I mean, if there's lead that gets into the aquifer, and so I'm a doctor, and it's a big deal. Lead toxicities, I mean, it could ruin the island. I mean, this isn't just a trivial point, and whether you're for it or against it, because we could build an indoor rifle range and then this problem disappears. And so I think there's solutions, and I just think that people need to know the real risk of lead toxicity to children. It's not just in the water, there's lead dust. I mean, this is a big deal. And there's been letters written about this from independent physicians who are experts in lead at Harvard. I just think everybody needs to know about this and not treat it trivially, which it doesn't sound like you guys are. It sounds like you're doing all your due diligence.
Thank you, Rich.
We'll get as much background information as we can. Richard, I used to teach at the University of Missouri-Rolla, which is adjacent to the Missouri lead belt. We're well familiar with lead. But what people may not know is that we had contracts to help the U.S. Army clean up its ranges at Fort Leonard Wood. There's a lot of information out there, and we'll try and get it and review it.
Great.
Do we have any other questions?
Not at the moment.
Mark, you've got another one?
No more questions.
All right, I'm going to take moderator's prerogative and turn to my part of the program. I, as Vice President, am honored to make the introduction of this year's salutee for the Nantucket Civic League Civic Salute. Before I do, though, perhaps as part of a suspense builder, let me tell you a bit about this honor. The Civic Salute publicly acknowledges extraordinary individuals whose activities have furthered the Civic League's broad objectives. Charlie gave you those 4 objectives and bettered our entire island. We've made this award since 1973 to individuals and on occasion an organization. Now, cue the drums. This year's Civic Salute goes to Dr. Timothy J. Lepery, a stalwart in our community who's been recognized by his peers as a fellow of the American College of Surgeons. Now, it's my understanding that fellowships are not handed out just for the asking, like Halloween candy. Halloween's coming up, you know. They are awarded by select peers after due deliberation to people in their respective fields in this case surgery, who've distinguished themselves in a broad way. Dr. Lepre is a fellow of the American College of Surgeons. As described by Pam Belloc, a New York Times writer, in her book about Dr. Lepre, Island Practice, by the way, I checked, paperback copies are still available. He came from Rhode Island to be a locum physician in Nantucket's emergency room and never left. Yes, Dr. Lepre is a great doctor. In full disclosure, we'll get this tongue to work. In full disclosure, he is my doctor and has helped me to beat 2 serious conditions. But that's not the main reason for the salute. In medicine, he's gone well beyond the bounds of a practicing physician and practicing surgeon. He is the go-to physician for tick-borne diseases, such as Lyme and babesiosis. When I say go-to, I mean nationally. Experience with diagnosing and treating these diseases. He's also a published author of scientific papers on them and is a member of research teams that study the disease. The tick-borne diseases are not just isolated to Old Lyme, Connecticut. They're showing up worldwide in temperate zones, the so-called northern climes. They are showing up, and Nantucket and Dr. Lepre may be leading the way in finding, if not cures, appropriate treatments. Don't know whether you know this, his office hours are Monday through Thursday. No, Friday is not a day off. It is the time when he can devote, amongst other things, to his opioid addiction clinic. Each week, our local paper, the Inquirer and Mirror, has an advertisement for Addiction Solutions of Nantucket, which is Dr. Lepre's clinic for those addicted to opioids. Those are both controlled and non-controlled drugs, some of which you can get on prescription, some of which are sold illicitly. But he believes in treatment over punishment. He's not out to control addiction by stern measures. He's out to help these people. By the way, it's not just medicine for which we're recognizing Dr. Lepre. He's contributed in, looking at my notes and trying to make sense of them. He's contributed more than medically in terms of community service. He aids the community and its children as a longtime member of the school committee and now its chair. The salute gives voice to our appreciation for this and his many contributions to Nantucket. He will receive a permanent award plaque memorializing his contributions to our community. Since this is a virtual meeting, we cannot really give him a standing ovation. If I stand, you get to look at my belt buckle. We can, however, give him a chance to respond. Dr. Lepre, the floor is yours.
Well, I'd like to thank the Civic League for this honor. I came to Nantucket because I wanted to participate in the community. When I was in Providence, I was in academic surgery, which was unfulfilling. Coming to Nantucket gave me a chance to be part of a community. I would be remiss if I did not mention my wife, usually referred to as the long-suffering Mrs. Lepre. She is a support and an aid, as everybody here understands the wonderful things that a wife can do for you. I was very lucky, and I remember that every day. She reminds me of it every day. I would like to think that the Civic League, you will notice my daughter is on the Board of Health. So she followed my lead and applied for that position and is doing very, very well in it. I think it's important for people to participate in the community, whether you're applying for a position on a commission or whether you're running for office. I can remember the first time I ran for school committee, the Civic League put on the Meet the Candidates, and it was a very interesting proposition. So I thank the Civic League for your endorsement of my activities. I've enjoyed every minute of being on Nantucket, and I'm involved in a variety of things, as you mentioned, addiction solutions, because I saw a problem and nobody seemed to be addressing it. I get involved in school committee in a way because my mother got elected to the school committee as really the first woman in Marlborough when she was 21. At that time, the topics were whether to clothe the statues and also loyalty oaths. So I followed in that, and I just carried it on where she, World War II intervened and interrupted her applying for additional years on school committee. I think Nantucket's a wonderful town. I like to be able to do things that can improve it, whether it's in school committee, whether it's in health, whether it's tick-borne diseases, or whether it's addiction. I think that I appreciate everything the Civic League has done, and I just want to thank you very, very much.
It's been a pleasure and an honor to do this for you. I think you're seeing that people are putting their hands together. It doesn't make a loud noise, but it's all there.
I know.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. We're going to move to the next part of our agenda, which is legislative updates. But I've had a note flash underneath the images. Let me turn to Charity Grace Mofson, who is Representative Fernandez's legislative assistant. Have I got that right, Charity Grace? Who says that Senator Sear will not be available until about 4:50 p.m. Am I correct?
Yes, that's just the update that we just received. But yes, he still will be joining us this afternoon.
Okay. So what I'm going to suggest to you and to our co-presidents is that we move forward with the presentation from Vince Murphy. Vince, are you ready to roll?
As needs be.
Okay. You're supposed to have had 35 minutes, and that would put us to 10 past 5. Charity, how does that work out for you?
I think that should be great. I'll go ahead and send an update to the senator.
Okay, great. Now let me introduce our own Vince Murphy, the town's coastal resilience coordinator, and staff to the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee, which is getting ready to publish a report. I know that Vince has put together a presentation, and I don't want to take any more time from it. We're pleased to have Vince as part of our town's support. It's yours, Vince.
Thank you very, very much, Lee. So by way of just a little bit of background, just before we get started, I'm Vince Murphy, the Coastal Resilience Coordinator in the Natural Resources Department, and I've been working with the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee and a group of consultants in developing a coastal resilience plan. Most of the things that I'm going to present here today have been presented.
Vince, can you get closer to your microphone? I'm picking up about 2/3 of it.
Let's try headphones.
Let's see what happens. It's too important to miss.
How's that now, Lee? Is that better?
I think it is.
Good. So if there's any more sound issues, please Lee, raise a hand or let me know. I also understand that I am not a native to Nantucket or America and speak with an accent, so that if I go too quickly or use Irish phrases that are unfamiliar, please slow me down. So we're developing a coastal resilience plan. Most of the materials I'm going to present to you today are images that were taken from the last 3 Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee meetings, where the consultants, Arcadis, together with sub-consultants, Stoss, One Architecture, and the Craig Group, have made presentations and all contributed to some of the images I'm going to share today. So just going to put this on screen. Can everybody see this okay in presentation mode?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Peter. So I'm going to go over this. I've got about 20 minutes. It's going to be a 20-minute whirlwind. I'm going to just start by outlining the risk, then go into the potential infrastructure, and then talk about some potential policies. I've been mainly asked to talk about the outcomes for Nantucket. That's the potential infrastructure and potential policies. But it doesn't make sense to talk about those without understanding the risk. Oh, and I also obviously like to say this quite a lot. This is mainly about sea level rise as well as coastal flooding and erosion. So it's always worth saying water is coming. So just let's have a look at the risk that Nantucket is facing. Sea level rise is probably our most existential threat. I presented this graph at previous Civic League presentations, I think in February, and I also think I may have mentioned it at this meeting last year. Here we have on the dotted line, the dashed black line, the sea level rise we've seen in Nantucket from 1965, when we got a tide gauge on the island right up to around 2019 is displayed on this graph. There's a couple of things to take from this graph. The little black line represents the 8 inches of sea level rise that we've seen in Nantucket. Sea level rise is non-linear. In fact, it's exponential, most likely. And there are a couple of things to take from this. We're looking at in and around potentially 6 to 9 feet of sea level rise by the end of the century. That's based on the 6 different scenarios, and they are in turn based on greenhouse gas emissions. And this impacts how fast ice melts, and then therefore sea levels will rise. The examples you're going to look at today almost all use the high scenario. And what I love to talk about resilience, I love to say, hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and unsurprised by anything in between. So here is the Noaa sea level rise projection using the high scenario. I'm going to go through a few time jumps here to go from 2040 and looking at how places like Nantucket, the downtown area, Palpas Harbour, and bits of Coat might be affected, through to 2070, where we see an increase in the amount of areas that are potentially underwater at high tide, plus the green shows areas that become wet, increasing wetland areas, through to 2100, where we see most of the Nantucket area being inaccessible, other problems around Sacajah Pond, and most of the downtown area underwater. But to look at that in some more detail, we'll look at the downtown area, again under the high scenario from 2040, where Brand Point area and the creeks are impacted potentially under the high scenario, through 2070, where high tide will be quite impactful indeed, and through 2100, where even at the lower parts of the tide cycle, there might be issues. The other big problem facing Nantucket is erosion. This map outlines the high scenario sea level rise and how that might affect erosion in the erosion hazard zones in the colored areas around our coastline. Just to look at Nantucket area that's going to be most impacted, there's going to be, this is the yellow is 2030, the mid red color is 2050, and the purple is up to 2040 under the high scenario. And this looks like a dreadful amount of loss, and to put it in context, it is. The inland part of Nantucket Road here is about 2,000 feet, 600 yards from the current coastline for 2100, if this scenario proves true. What the consultants did was they took the erosion and sea level rise and flooding areas that we just showed you and turned it into a coastal hazards map. They looked at this under a number of different circumstances. They looked at areas that would flood under extreme, high and moderate risk tiers. There's also a low risk tier that you can see in this next map. The green are houses basically throughout the island, and you can see the houses in the at-risk areas are effectively gone. So this is just to understand the risk and what may happen to Nantucket in the absence of any efforts to create coastal resilience. So now let's move to the key part of today that I was asked for, now that we understand what's at risk, and look at some of the potential solutions. One of the near-term solutions that the consultants looked at was for the downtown area. They have suggested this somewhat linear feature that weaves its way up through Washington Street, down by Straight Wharf, up around Easy Street, out towards Easton and up around Easton and Hulbert. There's a couple of different sections to this, and this is only conceptual at this point in order to understand how this system might work. This will be part of in the Coastal Resilience Plan, and it will go through how this might be achieved. This goes through some areas of private property, therefore it's only a conceptual idea. This doesn't threaten anybody's house or property just yet. We are some years from an engineering phase for this. To look at it in a slightly bit more detail and to look more in towards the downtown area, we can see that they're talking about, the red here is a raised road type system so that we could access the downtown area and get to the steamship authority in times of flooding. Up here around Brant Point, there's a little orange line that is a reinforced dune that would tie into a raised bulkhead on one side and raised roads on the other side. There are also little berms in sections to allow for free movement of people and vehicles to get to the necessary infrastructure such as the steamship authority and to get to Straight Wharf for the fast ferry. Once we take a look towards the downtown area, there's a number of different options. This just looks in on the Straight Wharf area. We looked at one option that's kind of somewhat in line with option 3 in here, but depending on community interaction and community feedback as we move from this conceptual phase into a proper design phase, it might be unacceptable to property owners for, say, scenario 4 to ever be implemented. It might also be advisable to have something closer to scenario 1, taking in parts of Easton Street, and I think that's Candle Street, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong on that. And which one of these 4 scenarios, this red line 1, 2, 3, and 4 would eventually be chosen, is going to be subject to much debate. But this is the level that they're thinking about it at the conceptual level, about what might work. And this could be a system of berms so that vehicles could still get by with raised road structures coming up to them so that we could still get to our necessary destinations and also get to all the stores and adequately have some reinforcement for storm tides and also for sea level rise into the future. But that's not the only way of looking at it. There's a handful of other long-term scenarios where a large lock system might have to be created. This is only another conceptual idea that might have to be created post 2030 into the 2040s or 50s, depending on the speed at which sea level rise advances and the necessity to protect the downtown area. This is not something that would be implemented in the next 10 years at the very least, and is very much a conceptual idea. and there is no set direction that this might take, and it could be a very different shape or structure over time. We also have to consider access around the island. Here we have an image of the Nantucket Road up here at first bridge at the Headalong Pond, and at second bridge here by Nantucket Ditch, and what might have to be done to raise the road in these white line areas and increase culvert or bridge capacity in order to have a raised road to provide emergency access to the Nantucket area, Nantucket residents and tourists alike in coming decades to ensure the future of everyone on the west end of the island. This also includes a potential for a retaining structure as yet to be fully determined around the DPW facility and the dump. Other long-term strategies involve areas such as here we see at Folgers Marsh, where the road may again have to be raised. And the question then becomes, what do you put in place of the existing culvert? Would it be a bridge that would allow more water flow and help re-establish a wetland system to the south of the existing bridge here by Folgers Marsh? And they've come up with this idea of an alternate walkway system that goes through the marsh here to the north to replace the existing bike path down here. Once we go towards Sackagepond, there's a lot that's going on here that is quite subtle. First of all, raising and moving the potential road layout to the south and inland away from the existing part of Sackagepond where this orange dash line currently goes. As it currently sits, this part of the road network on Pulpus Road is on a causeway to allow water to move from the marshland on this side into the waterway here. However, it is somewhat of a choked causeway and could stand some repairs at the very least, and a new road network, a new road constructed here on a causeway could allow for a renovation of this whole area, allow better movement of water in this area, and raise the road level to allow for access in an emergency event, so that people that live in the Quays, Quidnet type areas, Warwinnet, and along the Quidnet Milk Route and all those areas can have an alternative access into town, either through going through Sconset or in the Pulpus Road, because currently that is one of those areas that's at risk of being cut off not one way but two ways if there's flooding or an ice storm that damages the road network. We also have to think that Sackagepond is right on the ocean, and the pond level is pretty close to ocean level for most of the part. This could be subject to some erosion, and how could we increase the beach movement and sand movement to allow this to be maintained through longshore drift and keep the pond closed most of the time, so that Sackagepond does not become tidal. There's a potential risk in it. There's also the potential that some structures might have to be relocated as erosion and sea level rise come through this area. CO2 is a very important structure for Nantucket. It's our barrier beach system. It protects the inner harbour, protects the upper harbour, protects our downtown area. Having to look at how we might reinforce, for want of a better term, sections of CO2 is something that is no easy feat. It's a large natural system that is a barrier beach of low-lying dunes that can sometimes be overwashed, and there's some areas that are becoming quite thin in it as well. So how do you do beach nourishment and be sensitive to the natural habitat in that area, and do it in cooperation with Nantucket Conservation Foundation on their property, essentially, so that we can be good neighbours with each other, help protect the town, and not lose CO2, which is a risk. There's a potential for a system in the offshore area, could be groins, could be nearshore breakwater, as yet somewhat undefined. There's also good things you can do within the harbour, things that Natural Resources Department, together with partners at the Land Bank, a Land Council, have been working on for quite some years to restore eelgrass habitat. That is something that could really be put into overdrive to allow eelgrass to re-establish, be good for the scallop industry, but it would also slow the movement of water and take energy out of waves so that we wouldn't get areas hit with such large waves during storm events. Some parts of the near-term solutions for the South Shore around Nantucket could include dune building projects. There's a suggestion for one here, and also the strategic relocation of some properties in the Smith Point area. You can see in this presentation from this slide, which I think was presented on July 24th, they suggested a dune building project here and here at the end of Nantucket Road to protect Ames Avenue Bridge. They're also suggesting elevating Ames Avenue Bridge and adapting the public dock at F Street to make sure that we can maintain continuity of service for the people who have boats in the area, and also so that people can come and go to Tuckernuck and make sure that people who own property there can get to their Tuckernuck homes. But please bear in mind these two hatched areas here towards the end of Ames Avenue and the Nantucket Road, and out here on Smith Point. A couple of weeks later, they suggested something different, and it's a few slides on. But we must understand that in the long term, there's places like Smith Point, the end of Nantucket Road, they really are at significant risk. Parts of this area in here at the end of Nantucket Road erode at around 12 feet per year. The way that erosion works is an area might be stable for 2, 3, 4 years, and then there'll be an episodic event, and we could lose 30 feet in a night, or in a storm event, or over the course of 1 or 2 or 3 storm events. So that we're going to have to consider how to adequately do inland migration of houses and structures, and try and, for want of a better way of describing it, slow that down. One of the ways is by using nearby resources. I think this one was from August 24th, about a month after the slide a few slides ago, where they redeveloped their conceptual idea for the footprint area for the near shore nourishment area, and they extended it out all through Smith Point, thinking of using this relic overwash fan here as the source material for nourishing the beach, creating a new dune system, settling the dunes through plantings, and building out from the existing shoreline. This would have to take in the cooperation of all the neighbours in that area. And one of the Civic League groups, Nantucket Conservation Association, and their subgroup, the Coastal Erosion Management Team, who I work with quite closely, have been suggesting an idea like this, among many other ideas, for quite some time, and we're trying to build such things into the Coastal Resilience Plan as it's developed, trying to include as much public information and public wishes in the plan as we can. Moving west, we also have to think about other resources that the town owns or has to protect. Our wastewater treatment plant here is suffering from erosion on its south-facing shore. The shoreline is getting awfully close to its fence line, and not too far after the fence line are some of these settlement beds. One of the things we would that the project team is discussing is a dune restoration project and a nourishment project in order to create a dune system in this area and build it out and create resilience for the wastewater treatment plant. There's also the possibility of a nearshore berm that could be used to reflect or deflect wave energy and slow down erosion. The same principles of dune restoration and a nearshore berm could also be used around the airport to protect the end of the runway. There's a couple of question marks over this idea because the FAA, who control much of the activity at Nantucket Airport, as they do with pretty much every airport in the country, would have to have involvement and buy-in and permit this. Even though the town owns the land, we still need the FAA's approval because they own the resources at the airport, or many of the resources at the airport. For Tom Nevers Fields, we'd also have to look at a nourishment project and a restoration project. This is a large coastal bank here that is collapsing down. It is nourishing the beach below it, but we would have to look at how to settle this and create some amount of resilience to increase longevity, as there are some suggestions from the Parks and Recreation Committee, Parks and Recreation Commission, that they would like to renovate this. It's a few years or several years from this plan taking place, but it doesn't exactly make sense to renovate this entire park system unless we can ensure its longevity first. Moving towards Sconset, there's also an idea to protect Codfish Park area just at the bottom of the village. Another dune system and nourishment and a restoration project could work in this area. Then we have the bluff as it moves around to the east and moves north around towards Baxter Road. That is the subject of another sister plan to the Coastal Resilience Plan that is being worked out with residents in that area, together with several town boards, committees and commissions and town staff and many other stakeholders, including SBPF and the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy, are all providing input into that one plan. This has had an interesting past, a somewhat controversial past, and hopefully all the groups involved are working towards a resolution as to how to stabilize and move forward with protecting or otherwise the Baxter Road area into the future. That is the subject of what was the Baxter Road Engineering Feasibility Assessment that is now titled the Baxter Road Future Planning. Other areas around CO2 where it becomes quite thin could also receive a restoration project idea through more dune nourishment. These thin areas at Second and Fourth Bend are quite worrying. There's the potential in the next few years that in a particularly bad nor'easter, they could breach. This might be something that might need to be considered in the kind of next handful of years to decade, to be a sooner rather than later type project. That will be something that might be at the discretion of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee together with the Select Board. On the North Shore, on the other side, around everywhere west of Cliffside, looking around Washing Pond Beach, Dionis area, and towards 40th Pole, there's a handful of spots where there's slower levels of erosion, but strategic sand placement or a nearshore berm could slow this level of erosion. This would have to be done again, as with any other project, in cooperation with neighbours and neighbouring organisations such as Land Bank, Nantucket Conservation Foundation, and others. So now that we've seen some of the infrastructure that may potentially be put in place on the ground around our island, we now have to think about what other things. It's not just going to be a set of infrastructures. We're also going to have to look at some of the toolkits that would be available to private homeowners and private property owners in order to help them increase the longevity of their property. And also some of the policies the town might have to look at or even adopt in the next few years through town meeting and other relevant ways in order to accommodate or adapt to sea level rise, flooding, coastal flooding and erosion. To look at some of the solutions for homeowners, the project team has broken things into 3 groups, so to speak. This would be part of the homeowner toolkit for lower cost options, moderate cost options, and the high cost options. Lower cost options include how to evaluate where your utilities are in your home. If you have a furnace in your basement and your basement floods, there goes your furnace. Moving that furnace to the attic or an upper floor to protect it, and any other, say, white goods, such as refrigerators, cookers, ovens, washing machines, dishwashers, etc., moving to higher parts of your home could protect those. Sealing your foundations is another possibility, sometimes called dry floodproofing. Then installing flood vents to allow water to flow through your home and prevent the the pressure, the water pressure on the walls cracking your foundation or allow water to go through. It's cheaper to allow water to go through than crack your foundations. That is sometimes called wet flood proofing. And then anything then that is in the flooding part of your home, you don't want to keep valuables or important possessions in there. Moderate cost options, including permeable pavements, redoing your driveway to allow rainwater and other to soak down through the ground and into the water is another nice way of doing it. Creating a rain garden to hold and store water on your property, or filling in your basement to allow it not to flood altogether, are some of the moderate cost options. Then we have to move on to the higher cost options for private property owners. That could be to elevate your structure, something that's well known in the downtown area and has been practiced on many properties that have been renovated there in recent years and decades. Or just to relocate your structure. Can you move to another part of your property or buy another parcel to move your house to? And then land acquisition is another potential idea to sell your property to an organization that could turn it back into, say, a wetland or another type of habitat for native plants or animals. Nantucket is well known for its historic character, and recently an MVP, Massachusetts Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, funded a project on Nantucket entitled Resilient Nantucket Designs for Adaptation, which culminated in this report here in the center, Resilient Nantucket, Flooding Adaptation and Building Evaluation Design Guidelines. This was something that went to the HDC, the Historic District Commission, and they had significant input on this. This is going to be one of those guiding documents for historic buildings and structures around Nantucket and how to make them resilient to flooding and keep the historic character of each property and so many properties that contribute to the historic landmark status that this island has. This is also something that's going to be incorporated into the CRP because we have similar consultants that produce this document working with the CRP. That is just a turn of good fortune and we'll take good luck wherever we can get it. We also have to think about the restructuring of governance. We all know that the state and federal levels control many of the things we can do here, but we still have to understand what state and federal agencies to lobby and try and affect change locally for us here in Nantucket. We also need to understand what boards, committees, and commissions have jurisdiction over some of the infrastructure and some of the policies that are going to need some changing here in Nantucket. The Select Board being the premier one to consider, together with the Conservation Commission, Planning Board, and Zoning Board of Appeals. Departments that are of relevance include Natural Resources Department and PLUS, together with water and sewer departments and the Public Works. We also have to work with the HDC. They get final say on the appearance of a lot of things, and we need them to agree and be comfortable with the direction Nantucket is taking. The Steamship Authority and its governing board are someone we're going to have to work very closely with. When the mid-project report for the CRP was published in April, they evaluated many of the structures, businesses, buildings around Nantucket, road networks, and gave everything a risk score. The single most at-risk facility on Nantucket is the Steamship Authority at Steamship Wharf. And this comes down to a very simple piece of logic. So much of our goods and services come through the ferry system and through the car ferry in particular, and the commercial transportation boat, that we need to, that any stoppage to that is detrimental to the goods and services that come to Nantucket. Having that stopped for even a few days means the Stop and Shop runs out of critical goods such as milk and other essentials.
Vince, tell me how much more time you need.
About another 3 minutes or less.
Okay.
We also have to plan out how we're going to change parts of our zoning bylaws. We're going to have to work with the Planning and Land Use Services, known as PLUS department, in order to understand how to best develop certain parts of the island where development can occur or where development might need to be limited in coastal flood zones. Wetlands and wetland protection is no small effort that we're going to have to understand as well. Everything from that the Conservation Commission deals with and the local wetland ordinances may have to be revisited to understand how we can continue to do some of these proposed ideas within the wetland areas around the island, because most of what we're discussing or I'm discussing are in the wetland zones. We're going to have to try and reorganize or rethink some parts of our governance and not the larger parts. I'm thinking about the smaller parts here. There might have to be an internal working group to understand some of the coastal resilience issues. And one of the things that the consultants have been discussing is regular internal meetings in order to serve and advance many of the projects that are going to come from the Coastal Resilience Plan, because many of them will need interdepartmental cooperation. Just by way of my second last slide, I like to always look and bring it back to resilience and how resilience is a process, it's a cycle. We have to understand that we have to assess our vulnerabilities, plan and prioritize what needs to be done, implement those plans, which is going to be the next phase after developing the Coastal Resilience Plan. Then we have to have the hard wait for a chronic event, wait for that hazardous event, a hurricane of significant magnitude that is going to cause us problems. Recover from it as part of the plan, but then evaluate how this has worked. Did the measures put in place work or not? Then reassess and continue your cycle, all working towards always planning to improve your resilience island-wide. And with that, I'd like to give particular thanks to the Civic League and invite any questions.
Vince, what I'm going to suggest is that we ask Senator Sir to speak. We'll ask Charity Grace Morrison to make a report from Representative Fernandez, and then we'll have a general question and answer period for all three of you. It's approaching 5:15, 10 past 5 now. If you can stay, by the way, I can't hear you. Have you gone on mute?
No, I have not, and yes, I can stay.
Okay. So if you can stay, I want to give our attendees the opportunity to ask questions, because there was so much of value in your presentation. I had no idea that the report was going to be so comprehensive. But if I may turn to Senator Sir, is he here?
Hey Lee, I'm here. Nice to see you.
Yes,
Can you all hear me?
yes, he is here. Hi there. You're on.
Great, let's do it. Well, good afternoon. It's good to be with all of you. Wasn't sure actually. I think initially when we received this invitation, we were going to be doing this in person. Of course, we're not doing that right now. But it's good to be with all of you. I think I saw some of you folks. I was on island this weekend, and it was really good to be on Nantucket. Although the current COVID response to COVID-19 really has meant that traditionally I really seek, and Dylan Fernandez really seeks to get to the island as much as we can. Sort of pre-pandemic, it'd be sort of every 6 weeks, every 2 months. Certainly that's changed in COVID-19, but was on island in April, and it was really good to be back on Labor Day. I'm thrilled that I'm here with Charity Grace Morrison, who is a leader in her own right, and who recently joined Representative Fernandez's office as his island coordinator. Charity Grace has been a friend and someone I've certainly counted on to figure out how best to represent the island. So thrilled to be here with Charity Grace. And I'll just give a quick update, and we can get into any questions you may have. Certainly this is and I should say I bring greetings from Representative Fernandez. He's unable to join us today, but Dylan and I work closely together on all matters, certainly relating to Nantucket and a lot of things off island. Just a legislative update is sort of where we are in the legislative calendar and what's to come in these next several months. So in the pandemic, right, we really, from a budgetary perspective, which is one of the biggest things we do, we really expected actually to be in a pretty tight fiscal situation. We really anticipated and thought that this would be quite a substantial recession, that we were going to have to making some very sort of difficult decisions. And that is not how this has played out, actually. Revenues to the state have not only stayed steady, that revenue actually has increased due to all this economic activity that we're seeing. And then in addition, we've received a whole tranche of federal relief money. Some of that money that's been spent, there's a big chunk of it left to be spent. And so, in the FY22 budget, which was finalized in July, we were not only able to sustain level funding, but really expand funding in really important areas. In the Senate, we really led on mental health, fully funding environmental programs, making sure that we continue to have a robust public health system. So that is good news. What to look for in the coming months, we have about a little under $5 billion to spend in the American Recovery Act. And we're going to be looking at ways that how we use these dollars, which we're pretty fortunate to have. How do we use these in really forward-thinking, responsible ways, right? How do we use this money? I really want to use this money, to make investments in things that we traditionally have sort of kicked the can down the road. Humans, I think, we tend to like to do that, right? We tend in government and in our society, right, to sort of kick some big problems down the road. But as Islanders know, and I certainly know, right, we can't do that on some really big issues. We can't kick the can down the road anymore when it comes to meeting the climate crisis. Actually, last year, both houses passed and the governor signed into law net zero carbon emissions by 2050. It's a roadmap to get us there. This is really crucial for a place like Nantucket, which, and actually the entire Cape Lions district that I represent, which is so vulnerable to rising seas, to storms that have more ferocity. And so that is something, right, we're not going to be kicking the can down the road. We're thinking about using some of this relief money around climate resiliency, right? How do we get resources to communities to really be anticipating and making some of these tough decisions that communities are going to have to make, right? On Nantucket and across Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard, right? There's going to be just certain things we won't be able to rely on anymore. I'll use a Martha's Vineyard based example, which is the state road that runs from Oak Bluffs to Edgartown. That's pretty vulnerable. Probably in a couple decades, right, that will be unusable. We got to make tough decisions in our communities about that. And so we're hoping to use some of this money for that. We're really working hard not to kick the can down the road anymore around housing. The housing crisis. Housing was a crisis before the pandemic, and it really has been put on steroids. Now in Nantucket, right, there isn't a home listed that's under $1 million. And although the island has, and compared to the other communities I represent 20 communities. Nantucket's done the most of all the communities in building housing, in addressing housing, and it's still not enough. Dylan and I are working really hard to get actually a Nantucket-based idea, this idea of having a transfer tax on real estate sales over $2 million, having that transfer fee, that tax, as a way to fund affordable housing, to fund more workforce housing as well. That's pending before the legislature. We're trying to get that done. We're working on some other big issues. One that's been talked about recently on island certainly is a lot of questions around PFAS. And PFOAs. These are emerging contaminants of concern. The forever chemicals that are used in a whole sorts of applications. Yes, in firefighting foam. There's been some attention to the use of them at airports and in firefighting, but these are chemicals that are pretty ubiquitous. I actually led an effort with Kate Hogan, who's now the Speaker pro tem in the House, to get a task force on PFAS. We actually met today. We're going to be coming out with a report by the end of the year around recommendations for what Massachusetts can do, first and foremost to mitigate existing PFAS contamination, and then looking ahead around how we make decisions about the presence of PFAS in our communities. And then as always, I spend a lot of time thinking about mental health and substance use issues and public health issues. That's my background. I also chair the Joint Committee on Mental Health, Substance Use, and Recovery. The Senate passed a pretty substantial piece of legislation last session. We weren't able to get it across the finish line in the House. We're going to come back, take up and pass a pretty comprehensive mental health legislation actually this fall, probably in October, November timeframe. I'll be leading that effort and then hoping that we can work with our partners in the House to get something done. You don't need to hear from me about how emotionally difficult of a time this has been for all of us. I'm particularly concerned about our children and students in school, but people across the lifespan. And we're really trying to transform mental health accessibility here in Massachusetts. And so those are just a smattering of the issues that I'm working on. Certainly, we've been in very close contact through the duration of the pandemic with the town of Nantucket, with Cottage Hospital leadership, and with community members around responding. I think we've entered and coming, now that we're after Labor Day, we sort of come off of a season where, we definitely, COVID was present in our communities. That was certainly true in my neck of the woods in Provincetown, where, we really led the nation in really figuring out COVID-19 and the Delta variant in the context of a vaccinated population. But I think now, as we're moving into the fall and into the winter, certainly this continues to be a big challenge for us. But I think, my main takeaway from summer 2021, which was incredibly busy, I heard an earful from my island friends this weekend about how busy it was. Maybe it was too busy on island, but coming off of this very busy summer season, where we saw a substantive number of COVID cases, but when you look at the most important metric that I've been watching, that's the hospitalization rate. Our hospitalizations have stayed low, even in the context of the Provincetown cluster, the outbreak. So there's over 1,043 cases were identified with the Provincetown cluster. Those are confirmed cases. So we're probably talking about, thousands more cases. Of all those cases, we had 8 hospitalizations, none of them serious. That is huge. That is substantial. I think it really is showing that these vaccines work. And in the context of communities like Nantucket, and actually across the entire Cape and Islands region, we are the best vaccinated communities in the entire state. Massachusetts leads the country in vaccination. And so we need to stay focused on vaccination. We need to get the remaining people in our community who've yet to be vaccinated, either if they're hesitant or when they're eligible in the context of children. And I think in staying the course there, that is our best hope to continue to come out of this. And I think what we broadly saw out of the summer season, the 2021 season, is our ability to welcome people here and do so, relatively safely because of our high vaccination rate. So that's just a sampling of some of the issues that I'm thinking about, but we're always working on a myriad of issues. One of the most rich, rewarding parts of this job is getting to represent Nantucket, which is a remarkable place, which is an interesting, challenging place. I think of the diversity on Nantucket. I think of the census count we just got, really reflective of a community that's grown in documented population by 44% from the 2010 census to the 2020 census. That's just remarkable, and it's a real honor to represent this special place in the Senate. And I know it's a real honor for Dylan to represent Nantucket in the House. So that's the update from me, and I'll turn it over to Charity Grace.
That's appropriate, Julian. By the way, Julian, we are very, very honored and pleased to have you representing us, because we know that you know Nantucket.
High praise, Lise. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I agree. Charity Grace, if you've got any report from Representative Fernandez.
That's a tough act to follow, Julian. I really don't have too many updates to follow up with. After that, I will say that we have received a couple of requests regarding PFAS. And so we're going to be reaching out to the DEP just regarding whether or not any additional sampling kits can be provided to residents here who've applied. So hopefully I'll have some more information for you guys here shortly.
Thank you, Charity Grace. Anything more?
That's all I've got right now. Obviously, I'll see you guys tomorrow afternoon if there's anything else that comes up between now and then.
Well, give our best to Representative Fernandez and tell him we're sure it's busy because otherwise he would be with us.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Now, folks, what I'm going to suggest is that we open up the question and answer period for Senator Sir, for Vince Murphy, and anything that you wish to convey to Representative Fernandez. Raise your hand, which is the electronic, touch the button. Mark will call on you, and I'll ask you to identify yourself, to whom it is that you're posing the question, and then ask the question. Mark, do we have anybody with their hand up?
Yep, to start off, we have a question from Kenneth. I'm going to allow to talk. Go ahead.
Thanks, just had to unmute it. Hi, Ken Gentner representing the Noaa Homeowners Association. And I've got a question really for both Senator Sir and for the representative of Representative Fernandez. I know you're both on record as opposing this, but I'd like to know the status since the hearing that was, I think, conducted earlier in the summer of Senator Moran's amendment to the way the board would be organized.
Yep, that bill actually was sent to study 2 weeks ago. There's 3 outcomes. Bills go before a committee. There's 3 outcomes that you can get. You can have a favorable recommendation. The bill is released and it continues on its path by the Ways and Means Committee. You could also have an unfavorable recommendation. It's quite rare to have that. The bill is also released. It continues. And the third outcome is a study recommendation, which effectively kills the bill. So the bill's killed.
Good.
So pretty fast. I mean, I love Senator Moran is wonderful. I understand I understand why Senator Moran filed this legislation, but you know, that bill is killed for this session. You know, I think it has spurred some conversation about you know, as we look at how do we make sure the Steamship Authority just is, you know, continues to that lifeline, you know, for both islands. And so, you know, I think anything we can do to support it and make it more robust, but that specific legislation, you know, not only is dead, but I honestly, like, as long as like we're in the positions we're in, like there's no way the Senate will pass this bill if I'm in leadership in the way that I am. So I wouldn't lose much sleep over it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Mark, do we have anybody else?
That's it for now.
Ooh. Vince, are you still there?
Yes, I am, and I can see Peter Morrison waving.
Okay, Peter Morrison is waving. You're supposed to click the button, Peter.
Okay, I did click the button, but I think I'm on another screen. I'm going to raise a question for Vince, which I think is the mother of all questions for everybody listening who might want to know more about this, which is, Vince, for people who want to follow the progress of what's happening, can you give us maybe 30 seconds of what they need to watch for and maybe a website or maybe the next big event? Because I'm sure that people are going to have a lot of questions and they're going to want to stay in touch with this.
No, thank you, Peter. 30 seconds won't do it. I'll need a few minutes. So the big events and the big things to look out for. The Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee meetings. They're the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of the month. The next one is coming up. There's going to be 3 more every Tuesday remaining in this month after today. There's going to be 3 because they have a lot to deal with for the Coastal Resilience Plan and its development. So the next 3 Tuesdays and then every 2nd Tuesday after that on the 2nd and 4th of the month, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. noon is the usual time. There's a handful of resources. I say handful, it's a substantially large handful of resources that people can look for. On the town website, there's a page for the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee. It is many parts long, and there's previous meetings, everything from the virtual open house in January, number 1, and then the virtual house number 2 in June, where we collected much public input. And there's lots of recordings there that can be watched. You can also watch the recordings of the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee meetings. And if there's anything you see in a Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee meeting that you want to make comment on, we've just created a new comment section that you can access through the the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee part of the town website, or the Coastal Resilience Plan part of the town website, to give public comment. And comments can be as long or as short as you wish. You can also, if you wish, or if you don't wish to, you don't have to, put in information on any areas of the island or any particular things that you're interested in. Your name and your email address too can be put in if you wish. And it's available in English and Spanish. Then there's also an email address goes directly to the consultants if you wish to provide input directly to them and bypass town officials like myself and provide something you're directly really concerned about. And that, I think, is crp@nantucket.arcadis.com. And there are others too, but that's the highlight reel.
That's great, Vince. I just wanted to say I've seen an enormous amount of progress since we had our forum and you last spoke. I mean, you've now got, you're sort of pointing towards some specific solutions that many of our homeowners may want to begin to look at and consider in their future. And I guess the simple answer is Google Coastal Resilience on Nantucket, and you probably will connect. I know that there are a lot of ways you can sign up to get information and be put basically on the actively interested list for announcements. Thanks, Vince.
Welcome.
Looks
This
like,
has stimulated any other questions?
yep, we have one from Janet. Go ahead, Janet.
Thank you for taking my question. I'm curious about how the Civic League is going to help Homeowners Association abide by the Nantucket lighting bylaws, because I live in an association that has very bright street lights and it does impede the dark sky experience on Nantucket. Do you have a plan for communication with the associations, not just the residents?
Janet, hi, it's Lee. I'm turning to Charlie and Peter for an answer for that.
Lee, I would, if she's on the Zoom, Gail Walker would be the best person to answer that question. Gail, are you here? If so, raise your hand and Mark will call on you.
And if not, I can chime in, Charlie.
All right, go ahead, Peter.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm here.
Oh,
Go
good.
ahead, Gail.
Hi, this is Gail Walker, and as Charlie so nicely mentioned at the beginning, I'm the founder of an organization called Nantucket Lights, and I have been in touch with all the presidents of the neighborhood associations, and I'm working with them to make presentations at member meetings by Zoom and in person. I've made several this summer and expect it'll continue next summer. Unfortunately, a lot of meetings got canceled this year, but very much hoping to communicate the message and try to spread the word through the neighborhood associations. We do have this guide to responsible outdoor lighting for residences that is available through many of the neighborhood associations. It's also available at quite a number of locations on the island now. You can go to our website to see where you could pick them up, but we are trying very hard to get the word out to all homeowners and renters. I'll be also trying to get the Realtors Association to spread the word. I'm going to be reaching out to the Home Builders Association, landscape architects, the Chamber of Commerce. I'm trying to get everybody on board. I hope that answers your question.
Gail, this is Lee. I thought I heard Janet ask in part about street lighting and whether or not our in-town street lights, which belong to the town, and our out-of-town lights, which belong to National Grid, whether they're compliant with the sense of the code. I know that Nantucket's lighting bylaw is antiquated, but there is still a sense of keep it low and keep it down. Do our streetlights meet that?
Oh, I'm sorry if I missed that part of her question. I've been working with Lauren Sinatra, who's the Nantucket Energy Officer, who is our liaison with National Grid, because they are the ones who own most of the streetlights on Nantucket. They are not subject to the bylaw per se, I don't believe. I think there's an exception for public safety and so forth. But we are working we're working on a plan for converting the streetlights to LED, which, if done correctly, can be more dark sky friendly. They have the ability to be dimmed at night or put on timers. The color temperature is an issue. So it is complicated by the fact that the town doesn't own these, most of the streetlights on the island, the Cobra style streetlights that are on the utility poles. And to be able to completely control what goes on there, they would have to buy those streetlights from National Grid. I think, in the long run, that probably is the best thing to do, but the town is worried about how the streetlights would be maintained because they don't have the skill set on on the DPW staff for that. So that has to be considered as well. I will mention that Nantucket Lights and the Nantucket Energy Office are sponsoring a WPI student project this fall that's going to be looking into best practices for streetlights, and particularly streetlights to be converted to LED. In the meantime, if you have a streetlight that's bothering you, you can request that National Grid put a shield on them. That process can take some time, but there is a process for doing that. So I think that's all we can.
Gail, that's very comprehensive. Let me ask Janet if that covers your question.
Actually, my question was about privately owned, when a neighborhood association owns streetlights, they're not owned by the town, they're owned by the neighborhood association, and they are not abiding by the bylaw. What is being done to encourage homeowners associations to correct those streetlights so that the experience of sitting in my backyard and looking at the Milky Way can happen again?
Okay, Janet, I completely misunderstood. I didn't know you were talking about homeowners associations. And yes, I realize they own some. So for that, I think if you would let Nantucket Lights know in particular which homeowner association you're talking about, we can get information to them and try to work with them on that issue.
Makes sense. The association has to abide with the town bylaw as much as any individual does.
Yes, that's correct. I'm so sorry I misunderstood. I thought she was referring to something else.
Okay, that's great. This is all beneficial. Are there any other questions to Vince Murphy or Senator Sir? Oh, Charlie Stott's raising his hand. Hey, Charlie.
Thank you, Lee. I have a question for our state senator, or perhaps Charity Grace. A measure was enacted into law that provides for zoning changes to be adopted at annual town meeting, for example, by a simple majority vote rather than a 2/3 majority. My question, and each community has to adopt that lower threshold for approval of zoning changes. If they don't adopt it, then the 2/3 is maintained. So my question is whether our annual town meeting, for example, can be required to adopt that lower threshold by a 2/3 majority, or does the law provide for a simple majority to reduce the threshold?
So the senator had to hop off. Can you repeat the question? I'm probably going to have to follow up to provide you with a solid answer on that, but let me just make sure that I understand what you're asking.
Sure, Charity Grace, and I understand that this legislation was enacted before you came on the scene, so you've got a little catching up to do. But the governor's housing bill provided for reducing the threshold for approving zoning changes, like taking a 2-acre lot and making it two 1-acre lots, for reducing those zoning by a simple majority vote. Right now, we're required to adopt zoning changes with a 2/3 vote. So each community individually can consider whether to reduce the threshold to a simple majority, but it has to be, for example, in our case, voted on at annual town meeting. My question is, can annual town meeting be required to approve that reduced threshold by a simple majority vote? Or can a town meeting change the lower threshold by having a higher 2/3 majority? Thanks for following up if you can.
Absolutely. I will do what I can and hopefully have an answer for you guys tomorrow afternoon.
Thanks.
Great.
Looks like we have an attendee question that hasn't been addressed from Susan. Shall we allow her to go?
Sorry, who's speaking?
Susan Ryan.
Yes, hi. Mark, can you put her on, please?
Yep, she's on.
Okay, sorry. This is for, this is for Victor Murphy. It's impressive what the work you're doing. I'm wondering if, as part of your committee, you are making plans for who's going to write the grants that there must be an enormous need for writing these grants for the federal government and the state government to finance a lot of this, this work that needs to be done.
An impressive question and quite timely. So financing this is going to be no small effort, and it's not just a one and done type financing. It's long-term financial input in order to get a lot of these projects off the ground and maintained and potentially redone over time. So we're going to be looking at a handful, not a handful, as many different state and federal grants as we can get our hands on. One of the ways we're going to start to approach this is there was money in the Coastal Resilience Plan for an additional services budget. That is something that's going to be at the select board tomorrow night. It's on their agenda for a contract extension to use the additional services that haven't been used as yet in order to put money towards starting the grant writing system and what grants to start applying for. This has to be part of the contract extension because we need the Coastal Resilience Plan delivered first to know what to start to apply for, what's the greatest need. So that's one of the things. Second is going to be part of the implementation side of my job. So it's going to be something that's going to be a continuous effort within the Natural Resources Department and interdepartmentally to try and get as many MVP type grants, state and federal type grants, private grants similar to the seashore grant. Then I'm never going to be a snob about this, and I'll happily take any private offers of grant money as well, just so long as it can be properly vetted through committee and select board and accepted as such under the correct terms. So even if there's local money available to undertake a particular action, that's something we could apply for or seek as well. So we'll take any avenue. So then when we start applying for these grants, most of the state and federal ones, they have a contribution that's required from the body applying for it. They vary, most are either 25% or 50% match, so that whatever you're looking to do, whether it be, for the sake of argument, dune restoration or dune nourishment or creation, you might get 50% of the money from a granting authority, assistance from a granting authority, and then the town would have to come up with the other portion of it. So this is something that's going to have to work its way into the capital's budget, to be very honest and open about it. But it's something that we can work in over time. This isn't a one and done type thing. this is something that's going to have to be worked in as the HMP recommendations were, and they could be 10 years in the implementation phase. And don't forget that the Coastal Resilience Plan, what we're expecting in the next couple of weeks, is only going to be the first iteration. In about 10 years' time, we're going to have an updated Coastal Resilience Plan, and with much grander and larger projects coming from it as well. So we're really only just getting started with it and the funding cycles.
Hey, Lee, if I may interject, Lee.
I'm getting to the point where we're going to shut down the question and answer, but we're still within the time limits established in the agenda. Go ahead, Charlie.
Okay. The town is able to obtain grants if somebody like Vince Murphy can somehow find the time to draft the grant application. I have long felt that the town would be very well served by hiring a full-time grant writer who would do nothing but apply for grants, and the first grant that would be awarded would pay that person's salary and benefits. I think it would be a real financially beneficial program to do that.
Thank you, Charlie. Mark, do we have anybody else with a hand raised?
We just have Peter Morrison.
Just to pick up on Charlie's point, I just wanted to give you an idea, Vince. You might want to make mention at the meeting you mentioned tomorrow night or whenever it's going to be. You're probably aware that there is a Hoover Dams full of federal funding that is going to be released sometime in, hopefully, we don't know how much of it will be released, but it will be a Hoover's Dam worth of federal funding. And it is my belief that municipalities that are have shovel-ready proposals ready to go for the one part of your one and done equation are going to be very well positioned to pick up on whatever they want to do, as long as it's preceded by the term strategic infrastructure. It seems to me that Charlie's idea of getting a grant writer ready to address this, and not something that is going to fall on the shoulders of one person part-time, but to pick out all of the different things that could be justifiably called strategic infrastructure for Nantucket, and entitle this small island to a disproportionate share of the money that's going to be flowing through the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, perhaps starting within 6 months.
Just to very quickly provide more information on that. First of all, yes, lots and lots and lots of money coming down the state, and particularly the federal tracks, but those are going to be extremely competitive. We're already looking at other towns saying the exact same thing as us. We have this project we want to get off the ground for X number of years. So we already know, just like the MVP grant process that we've been quite successful with, we're up against it. We're going to have the competitive edge. One of the things that would give us the competitive edge, so a lot of the ideas that are coming from the CRP, is that our conceptual ideas to about 10% design, for the sake of argument. If you can get a design for a project to 30%, close to higher level engineering and shovel ready type projects, then you're going to beat out a lot of the competition that just have conceptual ideas. They want to pay for things that are ready to go. So that would give us an edge in order to get the construction ready phase, to have something that is near complete or at a higher design level. So let's try and see if we can work that into it as well.
You've anticipated my next suggestion, the term shovel ready.
Peter, we can talk about that a lot from the perspective that we have in the Committee on Roads and Right-of-Way, where we've been pushing for a number of projects. For example, I just drove down Sparks Avenue and I looked at the people on the sidewalk, and I know that there's a project ready to roll for replacing that sidewalk. This is just one of maybe half a dozen that we could do right now. I'm going to suggest, Peter and Charlie, that we've reached time-wise the point in the agenda where, one, I thank Vince Murphy for an extraordinary presentation. Vince, you've told us that this rain cloud might have a silver lining, and I really hope so. And then let us move to the final part of the agenda. Peter, where you and Charlie take over minutes, treasurer's report, and any valedictory statements that you wish to make, because that way we can shut down right at 6 o'clock as promised. Over to you.
Sounds good. We have three things listed. One is the approval of 2020 annual meeting minutes. And I'm not sure if, Charlie, if that was going to be something we were going to put off to a later meeting. I do have the second item, the treasurer's report from Rick Atherton, which I'm going to convey because he could not be here today. So Charlie, how would you like to proceed?
Well, Peter, I'm not sure that the minutes were sent out. Were they sent out, Mary? You're on mute, Mary.
I have the minutes of the annual meeting from last year. They were not sent out with the notices. I can put them up on the screen, but they're a couple of pages long. What's your pleasure? We're now down to 21 participants. So I think that the nomination slate, we should defer until the next meeting of the Board of Directors so that we have a full board actually voting on the nomination slate. And there are some questions that are still percolating around about who the president, we're still getting new presidents of local area associations. But I can put up the minutes and we can just at least take a look at them. That's a pretty housekeeping activity, if that is the pleasure of the group.
Have they ever been circulated?
They have not been circulated. Here they are. I think.
Oh, you're testing these old eyes of mine.
Yeah, Mary, I think this is pretty dense and we certainly don't want to read the minutes.
Okay.
So what if we plan on sending them out with the minutes of this meeting for the 2022 annual meeting and adopt the minutes of both meetings next year?
Sounds great.
Okay.
So if you'd like to move on to the treasurer's report, Charlie, I can ask Mark now to put up the screen share referred to as financial report. And that's something you can see in one screen, and I can walk you through it with what Rick had to say about it.
Sure, 1 second.
Okay.
Financial. Okay,
There we go.
I'll make
And
it.
just elevate it a little bit so we can get the bottom part. We know what the income is, it's the expenses. Oh, I guess that's good, that's good. Yeah, go, there you go. Okay, perfect, perfect. Here is what Rick had to say, and I think I can answer any questions if it's not quite visible on your screen. He said to report that the Civic League member associations have continued to support the league with the payment of dues. That's good news. In the 12 months up through August 31st, 2021, current and prior period dues collections totaled $15,500. That shows in the center column that you're looking at toward the top. On an ongoing annual basis, the league has plus or minus $1,800 dues paying families. That's a rough number in our member associations. And each of them contributes $5 per family member. And so that brings in a total of about $9,000 a year. So we're not an awfully big organization. We get $9,000 from each of our members in each of our 23, I think it is, associations. The expenses that we've had include advertising and community outreach, and that now includes our Zoom meetings, although we're getting better at holding them ourselves. We support Meet the Candidates, Meet the Articles, and other public forums to advance the information needs of Nantucket citizens. And each of those events calls for a certain amount of advertising expenditure so that everybody knows about it. Third, we also support specific initiatives and occasional unique situations. By a specific initiative, a good example would be the Dark Skies effort, which you've heard about, that Gail Walker's been leading up. And that grew out of the forum that we had last February. Gail has taken it a long distance since then, and we have funded the printing cost to support the community-wide dissemination of the brochure you saw. And we ponied up $800 so that she could print off enough to hand out to anybody who wanted one, including any member of the Civic League as a member of an association, or any other member of the public that wants a copy. It's a beautifully designed brochure, and we certainly got our money's worth. We also support unique situations on occasion. One example is the assistance that we rendered in protecting the Nantucket Boy Scouts property from a development several years ago. And a current example is the League producing our series of 5-minute YouTube videos on how to participate in town affairs and what to expect in volunteering for town committees. We have committed to cover a fixed budget for their production, and that is consuming a significant amount of this year's revenue. If you have any other questions, if anyone has any other questions, let me know. I'm reminded of the 15-second summary that I heard one business treasurer give of a Fortune 500 company. He said, everything that is supposed to go up is going up, and everything that is supposed to go down is going down. That might summarize this in a nutshell. So any questions, direct them to me. Otherwise, we can proceed on, Charlie.
Peter, this is
Yes.
Lee. A great report in the tradition of the Nantucket Treasurer's Report by Robert Benchley. Look it up sometime. You'll find it most amusing.
Okay, so moving on, I would entertain a motion to approve the treasurer's report as submitted. Does anybody so move?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, motion made. Do we have a second?
Well, the silence is deafening. This is Lee, second.
Okay, motion made and properly second. Discussion on the motion? Okay, motion to approve the treasurer's report. I guess indicate by waving your hand if you're on the screen, or electronically raising your hand.
Aye.
Peter says aye.
I've not seen any nays.
Well, I
So
don't know, if I raise my hand, somebody might call on me.
Okay, so the motion is adopted. Mary, your suggestion was, as parliamentarian de facto, that we put off the election of officers until the next Board of Directors meeting?
Yes, correct. In summary, the officers on board have agreed to remain for the next year. We have a new changing cast of characters on the area associations, and we have some exiting members of the executive committee. Bob Kushavari, who served for a number of years, has asked to be placed on the as a friend and advisor. We have a number of friends and advisors: Jason Gracia-Day, Kamal McCarthy, Gail Walker, Judith Wagner, among others. And we are still looking for potential volunteers for the executive committee. So we can get that all straightened out. I don't think we have enough votes. We have enough people here at the moment to constitute a quorum to actually take the action on that. And I think we should at least entertain some further discussion and make sure that the association's if we can canvass them and make sure we get the latest officers that they have elected, which they usually elect at sort of the end of the summer. We had some new ones that we learned about just today. So I think there are probably a couple of others in the works.
Okay, thank you, Mary. So we have concluded our agenda. And I think we can declare the annual meeting of the Nantucket Civic League to be adjourned. Thanks so much for your participation, and thanks to everyone for your ongoing support of our efforts to implement our 4 objectives. Lee, do you have anything further, or Peter?
I just want to
do
thank
not,
Mark.
Except to thank those who've stayed with us through the entire agenda.
And thank you, Mark, for what you've done for us. We look forward to working with you in the future.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.